Once more, I'm delighted to be joined by Konstantin Samoilov. I'm not going to do a huge introduction, but Konstantin is one of the most extraordinary people who's come out of Russia, one of the most unique voices, and someone who has a level of, I would say, reflection on Russian history and current Russian actions with a deep moral purpose behind it, which I think is incredibly not just unusual, is absolutely unique. So it is a privilege to be able to welcome him back. And of course, this is an extraordinary week in which to be talking. But before we jump into that, I want to say a huge thank you to everybody who supports this channel and, of course, everyone who supports Konstantin's channel. As many of you know, he's been demonetized. He does incredibly important and unique work. So if you can, make sure you support our efforts to create content. I'll put links to Konstantin's channel and everything you need in the description of the video. Things like Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, and various other things are absolutely vital at this time because they help channels like Konstantin and mine to carry on existing and doing the work that we do daily. Work which, unfortunately, many in the mainstream media do not quite fulfill. Konstantin, welcome back.
Jonathan, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be back. I enjoy our conversations a lot. I like the fact that we discuss a lot of not even interesting, vital topics. And I always have a pleasure of talking to you and, discussing topics with you personally. So thank you for having me.
It's definitely reciprocal. At some point, I hope to be able to. We were talking about food before we hit record, so we do have a huge range of different topics we discuss. I mean, it'd be great to share some plov in Tashkent or somewhere else at some point and actually meet in the real world. I think that would also be an absolutely extraordinary and necessary thing to do. For now, though, we have to do these online, and let's start with goodness. Let's start with the strike on Chernobyl, on the protective shell of the Chernobyl reactor number 4. I think we can dismiss this as being an act of chance or accident. To my mind, it's a near 100% certainty that it was specifically targeted, and the munitions used were ones with greater accuracy. Therefore, it's entirely intentional, and it's inconceivable that this was not done without not just Putin's permission, but actually being directly commanded by him. Let's tackle that first, and then we'll talk about the why this has happened.
Well, Jonathan, I think that we both agree that Chernobyl nuclear power plant is a very special place, and it's everyone knows that, and it's guarded by everyone, by Russians, by Ukrainians, by Belarusians, I guess, from one of the sides, and it's a precious facility that everyone wants to be quiet, to no one wants anything to happen to it. And when someone says, well, you know what, that wasn't us, oh, come on. I don't believe that any drone could fly to Chernobyl by mistake. Okay. It appears to be intentional. Okay. And I think that's just a horrendous act. I don't really even know how to comment it, how to get to discuss this, to get to the discussion of this topic. I don't understand how they can do something like that.
Let's tackle it this way, though, because I think it's useful to understand how Putin thinks. We cannot get inside his head, but what we can do is judge his previous actions. I think looking at his words doesn't really matter because it's the actions that are important. And if we look at the actions that have taken place on numerous occasions, for instance, the Debaltseve massacre of Ukrainian troops that happened when they were granted a humanitarian corridor, and then that agreement was broken and they were killed. That clearly would have happened on the orders of Putin. When humanitarian corridors were opened up out of Mariupol, and then those people were shelled and killed, that would have been under the orders of if not directly from Putin, then a clear understanding of a sort of loose interpretation of the orders given down to the army ranks, an understanding of their MO or their modus operandi. When the kids' cancer hospital was shelled in Kyiv, that also happened as a signal at a key moment when Putin made a concession in some way, or when the West showed weakness. These acts of retribution, of psychopathy, but strategic psychopathy, always follow any concession that Putin makes, or indeed any point in which the West shows weakness. So let's look at it in terms of a mechanism that we can predict. And my immense frustration and worry comes from the fact that we have not yet got into the habit of analyzing how he behaves and how he thinks, because the evidence is all there, and therefore our actions are not geared up to understanding how to actually deal with him.
Well, Jonathan, I think that is fairly easy. He is trying to get some kind of upper hand, right before the negotiations that are going to take place in one way or another, in one format or another. Okay. And he doesn't care what it is, bombing a nuclear, like Chernobyl, that facility that is guarded, extra guarded by everyone. He doesn't care. He needs an extra hand. He needs a trump card so he can play it at the negotiations. That's my stand of it.
That's a nice wordplay there. I mean, he has some really big trump cards in his hand as well. We'll come onto that one in a minute. I mean, the negotiations is a huge topic, but let's just stick with these terroristic acts and terroristic mindset, which I think has its origins, this fusion that Putin is between the KGB, which goes back to the Bolshevik Revolution, and the mafia mindset that he sort of developed as well. And there are other influences in there. It's not cut and dry, but you've got these two sources of extreme, I would say, extreme negativity. One could even put a label on it as evil. And yet there are many people like yourself who really, I think, understand the Ukrainian victory is the only way to resist that evil and indeed have a chance of eventually beating it. But there are many, many people within the systemic opposition, within the non-systemic opposition, even many people who just want to get on with their lives in Russia and pretend this isn't happening, who have not sided with Ukrainian victory. Should we be making this point clearer now that either you're for Ukrainian victory or actually you're enabling and aiding Putin if you're Russian? It's no good just sitting there quietly, hoping it'll go away, working, in some corner of the economy, because ultimately, whatever you're doing is an enablement of this evil and is creating wealth that pays for this evil.
Well, I've been talking about it for over 2 years now. Um, Russians, majority of Russians are sitting quietly in the corners of, in the bubbles that they have created for themselves, informational bubbles and, real life bubbles that consist of their work, their family, their friends, daily routines. And they are afraid to look beyond that bubble. They're afraid because it hurts. Because once you start looking beyond it, you realize what's going on in Ukraine. And I don't believe that there's any human being that would not be hurting when understands what's happening. And second is they're afraid. They're afraid of getting prosecuted. But unfortunately, that's what Russians are doing right now. And that's the majority of Russians, my estimation, around 80%.
Yeah, yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Which means that other things are going to be required. Other things are going to happen if this evil is going to be triumphed over. Now, let's turn to negotiations, because it's my view that ultimately Putin is not interested in peace, certainly not interested in peace for its own sake, but he may need a kind of temporary pause in the full-scale hostilities. I'm using these words very carefully because I don't believe peace is possible, not the sort of universal peace that might have happened in, say, the end of the First World War, where the guns fell silent, the troops went home, and that was it. The cleanup began. And obviously various empires collapsed and governments fell. Okay, there's a considerable amount of chaos, but the actual guns fell silent. And I think this is what many people in the West are thinking is the process we're on, and that's where negotiations will lead. But I think Putin is interested in that, and I do not think that kind of universal cessation of hostilities is, and there's a 0% chance of that happening.
Jonathan, I think that Putin is in a situation when I call either bad or worse. Okay. He definitely made a mistake, a very big mistake by invading Ukraine. And then he realized that he aimed for a quick victory that didn't happen. He misjudged his resources and strength and abilities. And he got himself into a very bad place. I call that place Zugzwang. That's where there's no way out. Every move that he was to make would land him in a worse position. Okay. And he simply didn't have a way out for a long time, because if he was to stop the war, withdraw the troops, or make a significant move that would, end hostilities, then he would have to answer the elites in Russia and the Russian people. And he would have to answer this question: why the hell did you start it if you didn't win and just withdrew troops and stopped it? So he needed any kind of victory or any kind of saving face situation. He simply didn't have it for 2.5 years, almost 3 years now. But the thing is, he can't go on forever, because Russian economy is weak. And what Putin has been doing is not sustainable. He's run out of resources. So he can't continue the war in the state. He can't make a peace right now to withdraw troops, because it's not going to be taken well. Okay, he has to answer. And then at the same time, he cannot continue this war for years, because he is out of resources. And it just, to make it short, two key resources he's missing. First is people. He is missing people to produce weapons. This unemployment is critical in Russia right now, and he's missing people to go fight in the front lines. There are numerous signs. For example, sign-up bonuses keep on growing. That's because fewer and fewer people are signing up, and the reports coming in from recruitment offices, they prove that too. So sooner or later, Putin would have to change the way that he he's conducting this war, and it's going to be a very drastic change. And that also is not going to be a power move for his hanging on to power, to the absolute power. So he is in the place he's in right now is between the rock and a hard place. That's how I call it. Okay. I think that he would stop the war if found an opportunity to save face both inside and outside Russia, for Russians and for the world. Okay, if that happens, then he would stop the war. At least it would appear that he would stop it. But I think the very next second a peace agreement would be signed and hostilities would end, he would start preparing for the next war. He would start beefing up the army.
Yeah,
He would start advancing military technologies, training people, and so forth. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
but he cannot continue doing what he's been doing. He's run out of money. He's run out of people. Um, he's basically running out of everything. And then we're seeing it right now. The signs are everywhere.
And he cannot go for full mobilization. We've talked about that before. If he started the Verbovka or, drafting people in St. Petersburg, Ekaterinburg, Moscow, there would be pushback. I'm not saying there'd be a revolution, but certainly, he would have to considerably increase the terror state and the duress people are under in order to make that. And I think he still wants to avoid that. So if he can buy himself a couple of years, as you say, to use the standard drafting procedures to build the army up, this is a really interesting question I'm going to throw at you because it's my impression that he's built
Just
a
couple,
yeah,
couple,
yeah.
couple words. That's very important. I apologize for
Hmm.
interrupting you. Um, on the mobilization, you see what Putin. The only thing for him is to hang on to his power. He has amassed the absolute power in Russia. He is the czar. He's on the very top. He makes all the decisions, important decisions, and his only goal is to remain at that position of the czar for as long as possible. And what's been happening in the 3 years hasn't killed him. Okay, he's still the czar. He's still enjoying the absolute power. And then he doesn't want to change the situation. Mobilization is going to change everything because that's going to be the second mobilization and it's going to be so much different than the first one. And the first one was a disaster for him. His ratings fell, people were very upset. Millions of Russians left, myself included. Um, it didn't go well, okay? And Russian government is very smart. It consists of very smart people, okay? Very evil and very smart. They have rotten hearts, but excellent minds. So they have updated the mobilization system in a way that the next mobilization will be stellarly efficient. Okay, they will close down possibility for Russian men to leave the country. They would be so efficient of getting those men who they really want because they don't have to go and hunt for them anymore. They've created a digital spider web, so to speak, around people and so forth. But that mobilization would change everything for Putin, and that the outcome is not clear. We can't say how things would be going for him. Perhaps that could rock the boat in a way that he would lose his absolute power completely or a part of it. Perhaps something could happen in that, his clans, power clans that are below him right now that could gain some power. No one knows. And I think that is why he doesn't want to declare the new mobilization. That's his weapon of last resort, so to speak. Okay,
Of course,
that's
yeah.
what I think.
No, I absolutely agree. Whereas if he has more time and less pressure, he can use the current instruments that he's built through the annual draft, through getting contracts signed, especially with people from the provinces, ethnic minorities. He
North
can
Koreans now.
North Koreans. He can draft people in from Central Asia. He can take all the vast numbers of immigrants who've come in to fill job posts. These are all raw material that he can use. He can then work on trying to get Belarus and other territories to become, funnels for his resource machine. And this is where I think what you said is interesting because it's my impression that his regime is now built on a war economy. So even if the guns were to I won't even say full silent because you will still get a lot of provocations happening all along the line of contact. That won't end, and the cyber and the informational warfare will scale up as well. But he cannot dismantle the war economy because he's created these huge financial bubbles that will only not burst if that whole war machine carries ticking on over, if those factories can keep producing war material. So actually, even beyond negotiations, as you say, he's going to have to be, maintaining and even accelerating that war economy to churn out military kit, hardware, armor, munitions. So is that how you see that playing out?
I agree with you. That's what he needs to do because if, let's say, a peace agreement is reached next week in Saudi Arabia or in Munich, I don't know, anywhere, and then all of a sudden a lot of troops might be coming back home, and um, things change. It's not evolution, it's revolution. Revolutionary, abrupt changes. They rock Putin's boat. Okay. He needs to continue, but he can't. That is the dilemma for him. He cannot do so because he would love to, but he's out of money. You know, we have talked over 2 years of how Russian economy was going to crash. It has crashed. The savings account, the Fund of National Welfare that financed the war economy for 2.5 years is gone. Zilch. Okay, nothing's left. Inflation is incredibly high. The key interest rate is high. Unemployment is critically low. Russia is economically is falling apart, and Putin cannot sustain his war economy any longer, even if there's no peace agreement reached. Okay, he needs to declare mobilization in the economy. Same kind of mobilization we just spoke about, but only for the economy. He needs to start expropriating, stealing businesses, large companies from owners. He needs to start printing. Well, they have started printing money. He will keep on printing money, and that's going to drive the inflation even higher to the levels unseen since early 90s. All these things, they are not going to happen. They are happening already right now. So he kind of cannot continue uh, to do he has been doing for 2 years. So he is between the rock and a hard place. But yeah, I agree that he would love to continue producing tanks, missiles, ammo, and so forth, and stockpiling them, just like the USSR did in the 70s and the 80s. But look what happened to the USSR as the result of this, militarization.
And eventually, yes. I mean, the challenge there, of course, is that after Brezhnev, there were several rather, elderly leaders that kind of carried on the same policy for several years. So, whereas people are sort of fixating on the idea that Putin may eventually fall, well, there's nothing to stop sort of these mini Putins, geriatric sort of KGB mindset people from continuing that same policy. So I think we need to look beyond Putin and look at, as you say, the transformation of society there. One of the real risks, of course, is that in this negotiation, Trump has started hinting at the lifting of sanctions, hinting at the normalization of relations with Putin. And of course, if he's minded to restart the full scale war, which I think we accept he wants to do. It's more a question of whether he has the capacity to do that. Then, of course, being able to sell his hydrocarbons and build up some of that sovereign wealth fund, use that normalization of trade relationships to Russia to stabilize, the economy after the impact of sanctions. He must be angling for this as well, because that's the only way he can get his military power back online.
The only way, Jonathan, that's the only way. Nothing else can save him. That is only way if he is allowed to sell oil at market price, if he's allowed to sell natural gas, Russia's bread makers. That's all he needs. Okay, he will start. That will allow Russia not to crash, not to fall so low that it's just going to fall apart. That's going to keep him going. That would make Russian economy sustainable because it always relied on the bread makers, oil, natural gas, metals, all things like that, natural resources. Nothing else can save, just that. And I don't understand why there has been talks about taking Russia back into G8, perhaps lifting sanctions in exchange for the ceasefire or peace agreement. That beats me. That's you're gonna continue. If you do that, you're gonna continue allowing Russia to do what it's been doing for the past few years, to expand, to build up military, and to threaten the world, basically.
This is what Churchill called feeding the crocodile. Eventually you run out of other people's countries to feed the hungry crocodile and it'll get to you. But this is a meme I saw, right at the start of the war, and unfortunately is more true than ever. Perhaps, however, there are some in Europe who are kind of waking up to this. Chancellor Scholz is the first one who's made a move yesterday, and it's a fascinating one because he has asked permission for a state of emergency in Germany to pass additional funding, not just funding out of budget, but this is borrowing, one would presume, in order to start rearming at a far greater pace. And if we look at Britain in the First World War and the Second World War, we did not fund those resistance efforts to, first the German Empire and then Nazism out of the budget. There's no way we could have done. We did it through massive borrowing against the collateral that we had in terms of assets and financial investments, especially ones that came after, the rich 19th century. In fact, we bankrupted the country by taking these vast loans in order to fight Nazism. It's interesting that Germany has been taken the first step. But if we're gonna not only deter Putin, but in some way protect Europe from being overrun, I think this is something that all governments are going to need to do. They're going to have vast borrowings to rapidly rearm. In your sense there, is this something that could have deterrence power? Because Putin's mindset is very much of the one of a bully. If he sees strength that is equal, if he sees will to resist, as Ukraine has shown, and the capability to resist, he's not an idiot. As you say, he's clever. He'll back off and he'll try to find a different route for his aggression rather than a head-to-head conflict. He won't enter a battle unless he can, in his own mind, guarantee a victory in that battle.
You see, if he takes a different route, it means he cannot win this route. And then the game will be played by the rules of Europe and not by Putin's. Right now, it appears to be, the tide has shifted. He was fairly powerless in the last couple of years. But now what I'm seeing is he's getting back on top. Okay, he has scored a couple of victories in the last few days, talking to the American president in, all these events that have happened. When we talk about Vladimir Putin, we should remember where he's coming from. All right, two things. He was growing up on the streets of Leningrad. Okay, soon after the World War II, and that was a tough place. And he's coming from a regular family, fairly poor family, and he had to establish himself on the street. And then when he grew up, he joined the KGB. He was a KGB officer, probably still is. I don't know if there's such a thing as an ex.
There's no ex
officer.
KGB, exactly.
Yes. And then he was taught many strategies and tricks, okay, that the KGB uses. So, and I think that's exactly how he was building, using his experience and knowledge. He was building the vertical of power. He was enslaving Russia for 24 years. Okay, and that's exactly the tactics that he's using towards Ukraine and the rest of the world. And you're absolutely right. He is pragmatic. He's smart. and he reacts to power. The only thing he does when he sees strength, when he sees someone fighting back, he backs off. I mean, it's been done so many times. There are examples of that. But if he sees that someone is trying to appease him, he just keep on pushing forward. That's all. So if he sees that Europe unites and comes up with a um, significant amount of resources and assistance to Ukraine, and kind of stepping in into the shoes of the United States in terms of armaments and ammo and military kits, then he probably would back off and he would try to go different route. But the thing is, it would not be his path, but that path that Europe would push him towards.
Yes.
And that is not a winning path, because you win the path, you win when you follow the path that you create. Okay, you set the traps along the way, you negotiate your way, the way that you plan, and then that's a win. When someone forces you to do the opposite, that's not a win. And that's what Europe needs to do. I think there's a good chance that if Europe unites and stands behind Ukraine, that might happen.
And of course, what Trump has been saying and not so much doing, because at the moment it's all words and speeches, um, may just scare Europe into some kind of action. But I think also we perhaps fail to learn the lessons that Ukraine has been trying to demonstrate to us over and over again, which is by demonstrating strength, you actually reduce violence and coercion. So, in annihilating the Black Sea Fleet, Ukraine gained control of that area and actually reduced the amount of violence that was happening in that area. And they're now exporting more grain than they were in terms of tonnage than before the full-scale invasion. It wasn't by playing Putin's rules, it was by redefining the rules and then controlling the sphere. The same with Kursk. I think that redefined the rules of the game. And the long-range drone strikes against Russia's oil refineries, again, it's saying we're not going to play by your rules. We're going to be unpredictable and we're going to project extreme strength, but in a way that you don't expect. And that seems to work, in fact. But we ignore those examples over and over.
Off Trump, um, let's not jump to conclusions about Donald Trump, because he does a lot of things that are very emotional. And I've been watching closely every single day, every step he has taken towards, regulating, well, towards bringing peace to Russia and Ukraine, as he had promised before getting elected. And he did things that, I would start pulling the hair out of my head. But then he's so unpredictable and he changes his words. Um, I will only make my opinion of Trump's actions when I will see a result, a signed agreement, okay, or a negotiate or some kind of result on paper, okay, because anything can happen. 2 days ago, Donald Trump comes out and praises Putin, saying he's a man of common sense, and I go, what is going on here? Okay, today his vice president bullies Putin, saying that, hey, if you don't agree to our proposal and we fail to agree on the peace of Ukraine, we're gonna deploy troops on the Ukrainian ground. And that's coming from the vice president of the United States. I mean, he's not just a water boy in a football field. So let's see what will unfold. Let's see what happens with the negotiations, and I just don't know what to think anymore.
Yes, no, I think we're all with you on that one, and I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot of people reacting to the words of Trump and his team, and they're reacting to every single phrase. They're getting disoriented, they're getting angry, they're getting confused, they're hurling insults. This, I think, is part of the game. It's part of the design. Whereas, we're doing a couple of things. We're assuming that his words amount to policy and action. Nothing could be further from the truth. They are an experiment in language. Sometimes not even that. It's just throwing ideas out into the world to see, what people's reaction are. Sometimes he just wants people to get angry and disoriented. So I think you're right to step back from all that and say, well, what are they actually doing? And then wait for those sort of concrete, demonstrable things that we can actually observe and test and measure.
Speaking of, you touched the topic of the refinery strikes, oil refinery strikes. I think that's one of the strategies. Please forgive me. That's been incredibly successful for Ukraine. Most of refineries in the western part of Russia and the European part of Russia, most refineries have been affected, have been striking, and this is causing chaos in Russia's market of gasoline and diesel fuel. Russia has large refineries in the eastern part, east of the Ural Mountains. But if you look at Russia's map, it's huge, and there are very few means of communication, transportation from the east to the west. Okay, there's a famous railroad that goes from the west to the east of Russia. And that's the main artery of supplying fuel to the front lines. And obviously the front lines, the army is the priority for Putin and the generals. But the market, regular people, businesses, the agriculture, they have started suffering. The prices are rising, and to keep the prices at bay, Russian government subsidizes prices to oil companies. It pays, basically, instead of letting the consumers pay, it pays a part of gasoline diesel fuel price to the oil companies, so they don't raise the price so much. But this is really bad for the economy. That's basically burning money. Okay, but that's good for toppling Putin regime. Okay, and Ukrainians have done a very effective job in wreaking havoc in Russian oil and gas industry. So I think that the strikes will continue, and I think Russia will have more and more troubles in this industry.
And this, I think, is one of the most important but overlooked reasons why Putin is maybe prepared to seek a temporary halt in the full-scale offensive operations. I think it's not necessarily Western sanctions that have done that. It is Ukrainian sanctions delivered by drones, which is extraordinary. On the back of Trump's announcements this week, we've seen a stabilization temporary of the ruble. We've seen a skyrocketing of some share values on the Moscow bourse. But based on our conversations, I'm kind of getting, a lot of people are freaked out about that. But I'm guessing from our conversations, these are just temporary blips because the underlying economics are just as terrible as they were, when we last talked a few weeks ago.
Well, it's pure speculations. That's hype. I call it the hype. The markets are hyping. Russian economy is a series of the bad news. Has been the series of the bad news for basically 3 years now, or 2.5 years. And this is the first good news that the markets, that the players heard in a long time. And then that's the cause of rally. Somehow, a lot of people in Russia believe that a miracle can happen soon. A peace agreement is signed and some kind of a pause, a peace, or a halt. We can name it anything we want, but the war stops, either permanently or temporary, doesn't matter, it stops. And then they think that the economy, by some kind of a magic wand movement, snap of a finger, will return to its normal state. Trump is going to somehow lift the sanctions, and voila, Russians will go back to their wonderful lives that they had before 2022. And that's not going to happen. That is not going to happen because it's much easier and faster to apply the sanctions than to lift them. Okay. Donald Trump does not have a power to uplift all the sanctions or most sanctions. And I think that I don't understand what he would. I don't think he would even try for most of them. Okay, so that is the temporary rally of the stock market. It's crazy, and ruble gained a lot of value, but on paper, that's not real gain because a very interesting situation here. In my books, ruble gains value if, for example, today it costs 100 rubles cost $1, right? And I go to Russian bank, I take 100 rubles, I give it to a cashier, and I get $1 in return. So let's say tomorrow ruble gains 10% of value, and that becomes 90 rubles per dollar. And I go to a bank, I give a cashier 90 rubles, and I get $1 in return. I buy dollar for 90 rubles, but that's not the case. Russian ruble on paper fell to 89, I believe, even lower now. But the thing is, if you go to a bank, many banks closed. They said, well, you know what? I'm sorry. We're temporarily not selling US dollars. Why? Well, it's our policy. Because they know it's a temporary gain for Russian ruble, and they will be a bounce back. Okay, so they'd be better safe than sorry. So they've stopped. So on paper, ruble gained lots of value, but if I go to a bank, I cannot monetize it. Okay. Now, okay, you say, Konstantin, let's buy digital dollars and digital rubles. Pay with digital rubles. Let's say I have 100 rubles in my bank account. Okay, and I go online and I buy dollars. Well, that's not so fast. Not at 89 rubles. 96 or 97. That's the rate that bank sells me the ruble. I say, well, yes, Russian central bank has set a different price, but Russian ruble is not traded on the exchange anymore. It's not market price. It's our price. We charge you anything we want to. We're the bank. And that's it. We tried this morning. We tried to buy dollars, and 96.7, that's the best price we could get with all commissions. Or a bank can say, well, we'll sell it to you at 92, and then we take 4 ruble commission on every dollar, like 4%. Some take 2%, and so forth. So to me, that's not gaining value back. Okay, that's on paper.
And they may limit the amount you can actually exchange at any one time. So it may be like, we're only going to allow you a transaction of 100 or $500 or whatever it is. So again, they'll put physical limits on that as well.
And then if you buy digital dollars, if you don't have dollars in your hands, I like to have hard cash. I don't like to have anything in my Russian bank that can take anything without court order, freeze my account, just because they follow one of the directives of the central bank. So if I buy digital dollars in my account, I cannot withdraw them. Don't forget, there is a ban on withdrawing dollars from your bank account. You have it there. Okay, keep your dollars. You can convert into rubles at the exchange rate of a bank that you keep your money at. And then you can take out rubles and have rubles in your hands, but not dollars. Okay. So there's a trick here. When they say, "Oh, Russian ruble gained a lot of value," not so fast.
Yeah.
Let's wait and see a few days. I think that I forecast that there will be a bounce back in the stock market. There will be. Well, let's take Gazprom as a big winner. It gained about 5% of the value of its stock. Based on what? Did they discover new gas fields all of a sudden that they can export, extract gas and export to Europe and make lots of money? No. Did anything change? Why did the stock go up? Just on the speculations that Trump and Putin are going to meet. That's all. So you see, nothing changed in Russian economy. The mood changed. Okay, the hype happened, and that's it. That's why I think it's not gonna last long, this situation.
And the last question really is about negotiations, whether there is sufficient cynicism on, say, the US side going to those negotiations. In fact, what seems to be a conscious effort to exclude Ukraine from a primary role in the negotiation and exclude Europe, even though on paper, if you look at the sheer sums that have been put into Ukraine over the last 3 years, yes, the US has put a lot, but it's only the 10th in terms of if you look at it compared to GDP or the actual resources of countries. Britain is higher, the Baltics are higher, various Nordic countries are higher. The US is pretty far down that list in terms of what it's provided per head of population or GDP. And in overall sums, Europe has actually, if you combine military and the sort of civic aid that's been provided, actually the sums that Europe provided are greater in absolute amounts than the US. But here we are. Trump is looking to exclude Europe and a large part of Ukraine from actually involvement in the process that involves Europe, that involves Ukraine itself. So I have, low expectations about it. But also the news came out today that Trump has chosen or started to choose his negotiation team. And a key person whose name I don't quite recall, but who I need to look up because I think it's quite important. One of the key people that's been chosen for it is someone who has I would say, long relationship with Alexander Dugin and subscribes to many of his points of view. So that kind of tells you again something about the, dare I say it, the quality of negotiations that are going to take place. So would you advise extreme caution and cynicism when it comes to any negotiation with Putin and for us as outsiders looking in on that so-called negotiation process?
I am confused. I'm being absolutely honest with you. I'm very confused about the actions of the US team. Um, you see, I don't know whether they're doing what they're doing sincerely. I hope not. Or they're trying to blow smoke over the water. It's one of the tactics they're using to mislead Putin and soften him up, perhaps, and strike where he opens up. Um, it could be anything. At this point, I don't think there's one expert that can successfully predict what's going to happen. I don't even think that Donald Trump knows himself. Um, I Ukraine, I know one thing: Ukraine cannot be excluded. You cannot make any deals on behalf of Ukraine without Ukraine. And the previous administration did a few good things, quite a few bad things. But I like their stand on Ukraine. They said there shouldn't be, there must not be any negotiations about Ukraine without Ukraine. That's a very good principle. Trump and Putin met over the phone. They spoke a couple days ago, and Ukraine was not in the picture. Europe was not in the picture. But then again, that happened 2 days ago, and today a completely different information came. That kind of threw me off a little bit, of course. Um, JD Vance said something completely different from what I heard from Trump. Trump appeasing Putin, JD Vance was bullying him.
It's like good cop, bad cop, isn't it? It's designed to
It is.
confuse and disorientate.
It is, but I hope it is at least. I hope they're doing it
Yes.
consciously.
We don't know. We
Uh,
just
you
don't
know,
know.
we don't know, and that's why I can't really forecast anything, not predict, but forecast, because I don't have enough information.
That's
I'm
it.
waiting, seeing, monitoring, keeping my fingers crossed, and hoping that this team that Trump has assembled will achieve result that will be favorable for Ukraine.
We
And
can.
I really hope that Europe will be involved, because you can't fragment the West. That would be a win for Putin. I think the West should stay united. The United States, Canada, the European countries, the UK. I mean, come on, that's if Putin breaks that up, then he wins. Then he spreads his vision of the world, and that's going to be lose for all of us. So I hope that we all stay united together, and I hope the outcome for Ukraine will be successful, favorable.
Absolutely. I think everyone watching will sincerely appreciate what you've said there and agree with that. That's the only way through this. This is one of the reasons why we're talking every fortnight, because things are accelerating, things are changing all the time, and I know people are upset, they're angry, they're disoriented. If these conversations in any way help people to not fall into despair, but actually to stay strong, unite, take action, then they will have served some purpose. So, Konstantin, thank you so much.
Jonathan, thank you so much. I love your call to action to stay strong, to stay united, um, to aim for the good, and the victory will be ours.